up, everybody? Nuts and Bolts Sports, Rod, Jordan, Henry, and joining us once again, Jeff Newholm. Thanks for joining us, Jeff. How you doing, my man?
I'm doing great, especially after results of yesterday's Bucks game.
How are your holidays?
I'd say everything went pretty well. I got some nice gifts. I bought a Chicago Sky hoodie of my favorite
Nice.
WNBA team.
Nice. I like that. Well, Jordan, where's your WNBA hoodie? You were rocking it earlier today.
Yeah, I rocked it earlier, and I had to spend $650 on my car, so it's not a good look charm right now.
It's on the at least you got the branding, you got the sponsorship. At least maybe you'll get paid a little bit for that.
That's right.
Yeah, we're here talking the first week of the NBA season, a little over 1 week. It started last Tuesday, but it feels like a week usually in the NBA is like an entire lifetime because so much stuff happens, especially in week one. I think that, there's so much stuff, there's surprises, there's observations that we can kind of take away from what we've seen. And there's obviously overreactions that we can have here. Because there are teams that are surprising us by the way they're performing. There are teams that are disappointing us by the way they're performing. And obviously, the season is going to shift in so many different directions. But what fun is it if we don't overreact a little bit to that week one? So let's go ahead and just kind of jump right into it. So Jeff, as our guest, I'm going to toss it to you first. What's been like your biggest takeaway, your biggest observation? What's the one thing that's jumped out at you more than anything else here in week one of the NBA season?
The trend that's been clear to me over the past several years has considerably accelerated now, and that's the enormous amount of three-point shooting. I know that seems like a tired trope, but the Warriors were the exemplar of this, and now even their records are being eclipsed by teams which are middle-of-the-pack teams. The Milwaukee Bucks, who, like the Warriors, have gone a long period of without success until very recently. Against the Miami Heat yesterday, they hit 29 threes, and were it not for a foot on the line, it would have been three number 30. And the fact is, what makes that figure truly remarkable is the way those threes are being shot. It used to be teams would pass it around, like teams in college basketball, pass it around the horn, and only when they finally got a three-point look or an open three-point look, or the shot clock was about to run out, they launched a three. Now, the very first opportunity a team, they run, open three, they take it, you miss, they run back on defense. This is making for a much faster pace of a game. And it doesn't always work out that great, as seen by the Bucks loss to the Knicks, where they shot less than 40% from three and lost by 20 points to the lowly Knicks. I know, always got to rip on those poor Knicks fans. Also, in the playoffs last year against the Magic, the Bucks had a very weak night in the opening game of the playoffs, and where Magic blew past them. Thankfully, it's best 4 out of 7. But this is a truly remarkable trend in the optics of how we see the game, and arguably it's not good that see players like James Harden race up, hit a three, race back. Personally, though, I find it to be incredibly fun the way teams are flying up and down the court, and I can't wait to see if this trend accelerates further, or there's going to be some sort of counter move to get some sort of new strategy to finally stop the avalanche of threes coming across almost every NBA team today.
Yeah, I mean, you're seeing it not just like on a team basis, and not even with good teams like the Bucks, but I mean, you're seeing like Terry Rozier in the opening, in his opening game there in Charlotte, going off for 8-9 threes against the Cavs, and it's just like, what is going on with players like that? So Jordan, I'm curious, like, do you have any response to that, or do you want to kind of toss it to something else that's jumped out at you?
No, I mean, we can touch on that. It's definitely interesting. I mean, the league has been kind of trending that way for the better part of a decade, and it's probably, you can really trace everything back to Steph Curry, and it's kind of that 2014-15 year. We were kind of like, hey, wow, this works. This guy won an MVP. This guy won a title doing it this way. And then 2015-16 season, where he was unanimous MVP, one of the best offensive seasons ever. He exploded that year, set the record for most made threes in the season. Just kind of he influenced all these guys, right? All the you see the Trae Youngs, the Bradley Beals, all these guys that are now established stars in the league. These guys came up watching Steph Curry. Doing that. So I think that's kind of like the main reason for that. And while it is, it's cool to see, obviously the Bucks, I'm sure Jeff's, ecstatic over the win last night. It is interesting. You see a team like, Houston, who's been notorious for that kind of style of play, where it's either going to be a 3-pointer or a layup and nothing in between. It makes it a little tough to watch sometimes, I guess. I kind of do miss the old school of like, hey, let's dump it in the post and see if we can get a bucket, or, incorporate a little bit of the mid range, because it can get a little repetitive just saying, hey, pick and roll 3-pointer. If not, get the rebound, dish it out for a 3-pointer. But I mean, the league always kind of adapts. It changes throughout the years, and that's just how it is. And we got to get used to it. But yeah, I mean, overall, it's been a good first week. I think with the unique circumstances of the start with, the COVID protocols and everything like that, for the most part, other than like a little bit of a Houston issue at the beginning there, everything's gone pretty smoothly. I think Shams tweeted out today they've, the last like 495 tests or whatever have come back negative. So they're continuing to do a good job there. And I'm just excited. It's been cool to have, games back every night. You've seen some unique teams start out well, like the Magic and the Hawks. I mean, if you would have said that those would be the only undefeated teams in the league before the before the season started, I would have laughed. But that's we're getting. We keep talking about the theme. It's such a unique set of circumstances, and we're going to get a unique season from it.
Yeah, Henry, what are your thoughts on the circumstances that Jordan brings up, and also maybe how that has contributed to the play? Whether is that making for a little bit looser reins on the 3-point line, or do you think that's kind of impacting any sort of play at all?
I mean, I feel like circumstances are just going to keep changing throughout the season, and then just like as the seasons go on, I feel like we had a massive change or shift in like the way the game is played, like what Jordan said back in the 2014-2015 season, where Steph Curry, I really do believe he's the last player to change the game so far, or at least from recent memory, because now he kind of birthed Trae Young and his style of play. Because I saw Trae Young in high school, and going into college, that's when he started, pulling up like Steph Curry. So it just goes to show the type of influence that he's going to have for players to come, and just that's where this league is heading. I mean, this record set by the Bucks, was it 28 or 29 threes?
29.
It was 29.
29 threes. Okay, I wouldn't be surprised if it gets surpassed within the next 2 years, because that's just where the league is heading now. And I do, and there's statistics that show like 2005 season or season around that era to now, not only the amount of points per game averages have risen, but also the amount of 3-point attempts and just 3-pointers made. So there's even talk, how Adam Silver is a very experimental commissioner. There's even talks, or at least rumors, about a 4-point line sometime down the line. Do you guys think that might happen? Honestly,
I don't think it will, and I really don't want it to. If I'm being
I don't want
honest.
it. Yeah,
I'm not comfortable with that. I personally wouldn't like that. I like the pace at which the league and these guys are playing at right now. It is definitely a change of pace from even 5 years ago, if we're being completely honest, even 2 years ago. But like, it's exciting, and especially like the past couple of seasons, I feel like have been, from my personal like memory of having watched basketball for whatever the past 10 to 15 years, like these have been some of the most exciting seasons for me personally. Even though my team has been garbage the past few years, I've still just had the most fun watching the actual game of basketball, just because of the caliber of player and the caliber of team and what they're able to do. I mean, we've seen so many records be set over these past couple of years, both on the offensive and the defensive end. And I think it's really contributed to a pretty exciting and unique style of play. But I'll open the floor to you guys. What are your thoughts on it?
On the 4-point play?
Yeah.
Oof. No.
I've never really been a fan of the idea. One line of thinking, it seems like it's a natural progression from 2-point, 3-point to 4-point. That's not the way I see it. The Harlem Globetrotters have a 4-point play, but okay, the NBA should not be compared seriously to the Harlem Globetrotters. At this point, it's just a silly show. The NBA, it's serious entertainment, right? And what's beautiful about it is its simplicity. You got the hardwood. Each line has a purpose, and the players operate almost like clockwork. We don't want to be messing around with yet another new factor in what's already becoming a rapid moving game with so many different data points. So my opinion, no. If it were up to me, it never is, of course, I wouldn't be for a 4-point play.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Jeff actually said is a really good point. I said that the lines on the court right now are like each one has a set purpose, and you look back to the 70s and 80s, right, when they started to bring in that 3-point line, it was out of necessity, right? You had they realized, hey, we should reward guys who have a good natural shooting ability and are able to extend the range. So they did their measurements, made the 3-point line, and it's been working flawlessly ever since. You put in the 4-point line, and like Jeff said, it turns into kind of like a show, like a Harlem Globetrotters thing, where guys are just going to be pulling up. We're going to see LaMelo pulling up 6 times a game from that spot, just because he thinks he can make it. And it turns into kind of like, I feel like it's like a video game at that point, where you just start customizing every single thing and changing it, and it just takes away from what basketball is supposed to be. Basketball is not supposed to be guys chucking from 35 feet away all game. Guys like Curry and Trae Young, like if you're good enough to do it for 3 points, go for it. But at the end of the day, basketball is still supposed to be passing, cutting, getting shots at the rim, pick and roll, stuff like that. And I just feel like that style, the regular nature of basketball would kind of go away if we added something like that.
Yeah, I agree. But speaking of Trae Young, I do kind of want to touch on some of these surprising teams. So you mentioned the Magic and the Hawks being undefeated. I will lump my Cavs into this because they're 3-1. They lost yesterday, but they're still playing well. The Kings are another surprising team, 3-1, 2 wins over the Nuggets. That's pretty impressive. And then the Suns, who I think we expected to be good, but they've started off pretty hot as well, 3-1 start as well. Are there any other teams that have jumped out to you as surprises, or do either of you or any of you guys want to touch on, any of these teams that have really jumped out? Henry, looks like you had some of this.
Yeah, I was going to say, because before you mentioned the Cavs, I was about to say the Cavs are third place in the East right now. I know it's super early in the season, but it's going to be a weird season. It already is a weird season. And just seeing the Magic, the Hawks, and the Cavs as the top 3 teams in the East. And then in the West, we got, Clippers are number 1, even though they had like a 50-point loss the other day. Just forget about that. If we're talking about just being number 1 in the West, the Suns and the Kings, I know it's super early, but it's just like, I love seeing surprise teams. I didn't expect the Orlando Magic to go 4-0. Markelle Fultz has been playing really, really well. And you know what? I didn't expect the Washington Wizards to go 0-4, especially because Bradley Beal is averaging over 30 points a game, and Russell Westbrook has a triple-double in nearly every game. So I don't know if you guys want to talk about that, because I think that's the biggest surprise for me so far. I expected at least 1 or 2 wins out of them this early in the season, but to go 0-4, I feel bad for our boss Joe. I don't know, he's a Wizards fan. So just to see that, and I felt kind of bad for Russell Westbrook, because I saw that. I don't know if you guys saw that video. He just has his head down and everything. He's always looking for a new fresh start. He knows.
All right, looks like he might have frozen up there. Hopefully he'll come back.
His take was so bad that
I do personally feel bad about the Wizards, but yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's one of those things. I agree. I thought they'd be at least like 2-2 to this point. But you see Beal and Wall putting up the counting stats. I mean, I think Russ is perfectly in line to average triple double again this year, along with your boy Jokic. I think sneakily, I know first week reactions are a little much, but he's averaging almost triple double as well, and I think he has a chance to. But for the Wizards, it's all offense and defense. It's not like they're not scoring the ball. They're doing exactly what they did last year, scoring 110, 115 points a game, but they're giving up like 119. So you have to play some semblance of defense, and Beal's not known for that. He graded as one of the worst defenders in the league last year. Russ is a good defender when he wants to be. He picks his spots, but sometimes he gambles too much. I think if he just stayed more like consistent and disciplined, I think he'd be a much better defender. So when your 2 best players aren't really that great, and then Davis Bertans isn't going to be a superstar defender. Rui Hachimura is not going to be there yet. Who else? I mean, you have like Mo Wagner coming off the bench. Like they don't have guys. They don't have like anybody that can like really get a big stop for them. So unless something changes, drastically, it looks like early that they could be in for a long season. It'll be exciting. There'll be a lot of close games, which is going to break Joe's heart. But right now, that they have a lot of work to do on that end.
Yeah, Jeff, any thoughts on the Wizards?
What I fear about Russell Westbrook, people let him get away with it when the Thunder were succeeding, but now the flaw in his line of reasoning is becoming easier to see. He shoots for the numbers, not necessarily what helps the team win. As Jeff Van Gundy, ESPN announcer, former Knicks coach, so eloquently put it, a triple-double is not a real statistic. It's 10-10-10. So what? So what? Who cares that you move the decimal spot one over? How is that a real statistic? And so a triple-double, I know, and the vast majority of human beings could not have a triple-double. The problem comes when you're shooting for it and not necessarily what's helping the team win, especially winning the playoffs. Russell Westbrook's performance especially declines. Thankfully for the Wizards, the top 10 teams make the play-in this year. So there's plenty of time for them to turn it around in the weaker Eastern Conference. However, with his skills declining from his three-point shooting and free throw shooting, Westbrook needs to let go of this concept of this arbitrary number and contribute to the team as best he can. He recently tweeted out a Martin Luther King quote, "Great inspiration, young man. Please take advantage of that. Take it to heart and go out there and ball your hardest and don't worry about those silly stats because that's just for fantasy. And NBA players are way better than that."
Yeah, and honestly, I would say if anything, the biggest problem too with Russ is that he, and it's one of his strengths, but also his weakness at the same time is that he goes 100%, right? And something that I've always respected about him. Like he wants to win. I know he wants to win every game. I know he's super competitive, and I know that when you have him out there, you are getting 100% effort for the entirety of the time. So I do have to give him credit for that because there's very few guys I think this decade, especially with this newer generation of players, I don't think we see that a lot anymore. But however, that does kind of prohibit him at times, and he goes a little too hard. He starts going for that triple double. He starts forcing shots, trying to just will his team out of it when maybe the best play is to get somebody else involved. If anything, he should take a page out of Chris Paul's book and just watch how Chris Paul is now in the last twilight of his career, and able to manage everything from the speed of the game to controlling everything on offense to picking his spots when he needs to score, picking his spots when he needs to get guys going. That's a guy who should really take a page out of his book. Otherwise, I'm afraid that the last whenever the last like 2 or 3 years of Russ's career are, it might be a lot uglier than it would be for some other guards, because the superstars are generally the ones that don't always know when it's over, and so it can look a little bit bad. But the Wizards have some work to do for sure.
Of these teams that have either started on one end of the spectrum or the other, who do you think is going to be like the first to tip back in the direction that we expected them to? And we can even loop some of these good teams into this conversation as well, because I mean, the Bucks and the Lakers, who expected to be on top of both these conferences, are struggling. I guess they're both 500 right now. Do you think it's like the Magic are going to start to lose 4 straight now? Do we think that the Lakers are maybe going to turn around? And Henry, you've got something to add here.
Yeah, that's been in my mind. It's the beginning of the season. This is what happens a lot of the times. I've seen this happen before where surprising teams have good starts and then they go back to their old ways, and then good teams have bad starts and then they go back to their old ways. So I don't see what the Lakers are right now. They're 7th in the West. I don't think they're going to end 7th in the West. So at the end of the regular season, they're going to be top 2. They're going to be top 2 in the West, either first or second. And then when it comes to, I just think the Kings don't have the type of consistency in their franchise. So good start. Halliburton is playing excellent basketball. He's actually one of my favorite rookies so far. He's been able to show off for the Kings, but it's just that terms of consistency, because the West is the toughest conference between the two, and for the Kings to keep up or even make the top 10, I don't think I can see that happening this season. So far they're proving everybody wrong, but so far there's only 4 games into the season. And for the Magic, I can see them making the playoffs, but not to be a top 5 team in the East when it's all said and done in terms of the regular season. So I love that point that you brought up, Roger, because this can tip back and forth very drastically, very fast. So what do you guys think on that?
Go ahead, Jeff. I'm going to end with something a little different, so you can go ahead if you want.
Yeah, Jeff, plug your Bucks here, because they definitely are, they're coming off a couple bad losses, if we're being completely honest. So definitely talk about that.
So I think the Bucks are the most deceiving 2-2 team in the league, because that first loss, the Bucks were in perfect position to win, and Jason Tatum banks in a shot off the back rim, and it goes through, and the Bucks still had a chance to tie the game were it not for a Giannis free throw. The loss to the Knicks, yes, that was a terrible result. Can't argue that. And their other 2 wins, their 2 wins were a 39-point win over the Golden State Warriors. Think about that. And a 47-point win on the road in Miami. The Bucks, for better or maybe for worse, over the last 3 years have been push it all in the regular season, go as hard as you can. We'll see what happens in the playoffs. What we saw against the Heat yesterday is the Bucks gave an incredible effort the first 3 quarters. In the fourth quarter, everyone went to the bench. You put people like DJ Wilson and Sam Merrill in, Giannis's brother Thanasis go around and have their fun. And tomorrow we go back and do it all again, and hopefully they don't play in the fourth quarter. I think the Bucks, they are the Vegas favorite to have the most wins in the Eastern Conference. I don't see that being a problem at all, especially with the Spencer Dinwiddie injury taking a big bite out of Brooklyn. The Bucks are going to easily rocket ahead and claim the top record in Eastern Conference. Is that good for the playoffs? We'll have to see. With the addition of Drew Holiday, the Bucks are going to be a powerhouse. Don't worry about the Boston loss; they're in perfectly good shape.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Bucks are going to be fine. I mean, when you have one of the 3 best players in the world and a 2-time reigning MVP, I think they're going to be good to go, especially with that Dinwiddie injury. The Magic, I mean, they're going to fall. I think law of averages, they have to fall down. Obviously, they're not going to go 72-0. But I guess I feel like I overestimated them. I had them out of the playoffs, I think, entirely, or maybe if anything, like the 10th seed in the playing game.
I did too, yeah.
Just because I thought, with the Hawks kind of emerging and the Wizards as well, that they wouldn't really have a shot. But you got to give a little credit to Steve Clifford, because for the last couple of years, while they haven't been a kind of title contender, they play the same way every night. He's got his guys playing, as good a defense as he can, getting, guys like Terrence Ross and Vucevic and Fultz and those guys, getting the most out of them on both ends of the floor. They rebound the ball well. They don't give up too many second chances, and their offense has been efficient so far. So you got to give him credit there. So I think I think as long as they don't have any major injuries, they'll at least be competitive, and they'll probably fall back to earth to like a 6, 7, 8 range. But I think they've proved some people wrong. I agree with Henry. The Kings, I think, same thing. The West is just going to be too loaded, and I don't know. We've seen this before where the Kings get a little hot and everyone starts to jump on that. Oh, Fox and Hield and Bagley, they're here, and it's just like you look a little bit deeper and there's a lot more holes than you'd think. The one thing that I think is the most interesting, and I don't know if we can talk about just for a second, is I went into this season and the draft thinking that the draft was terrible, and thinking that there weren't any major stars. And there haven't been any necessarily superstars to come out so far, but I was surprised at the quality of play. I think we've had a lot of good rookies from the entire first round, picks 1 through 30, that have been contributing to teams that I didn't expect. So I just wanted to run through the list that I put together real quick. First, Anthony Edwards, much better than I thought. I mean,
yep, I agree.
Minnesota is struggling a little bit. Obviously, the Towns injury really stinks. Is going to hurt them.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's scoring 15 a game. I did not, honestly, I was very low on him, even as the number 1 pick, so didn't see that coming. Number 9, Denny Avdija for the Wizards. The guys that I mentioned, they're not putting up like eye-popping numbers, but the percentages are overall good, and everybody looks comfortable, which is surprising because you don't have no March Madness. You didn't have a lot of time to work out for teams, and because of COVID, these guys probably weren't playing like 5-on-5 pickup for most of the time. So I was surprised with such a short training camp how good these guys have come in. So he's been good for them. Precious Chua for the Heat looks like a steal. He looks like such a Miami Heat guy.
Yeah.
He just comes in, plays hard for 15, 20 minutes a game.
And we talked about that on that draft episode, I think, how he looked like the kind of guy that was going to be a perfect fit there.
They took him and we were like, wow, that just seems like, a perfect thing.
Yeah.
Cole Anthony, even for the Magic, again, he's playing backup minutes behind Fultz, but he was supposed to be a guy who was top 5 projected pick. Kind of had a rough season. North Carolina fell off that lottery board, but has been doing good things for them. Halliburton, that was the one guy I was preaching to everybody, and I think we all were kind of in agreement that he was going to be a possible steal of the draft. He was a 12th pick, and he's putting up 11 and 5 a game, shooting the ball well. He had that comment yesterday about somebody said the 3-point shot wouldn't work or whatever in the NBA, so he's doing well. And then last is honestly Henry's guy, Pritchard. When they took him, I thought, okay, like he'll be like a very, very poor man's TJ McConnell or something like that. just based on the way he looks.
That's rough. That's rough.
No, but he's proved everybody wrong. And I was listening to one of the podcasts too, and they were talking. They said like he has won at every level. Oregon was extremely successful. Obviously, when he was there, his high school team was like not a renowned program, and they won like 3 district or state titles or whatever because of him. So it seems like he's kind of a winner at every level, and he's playing well. He's helped them in a couple of their games when their bench has been really struggling. He's come in and provided a spark. So I just thought that was interesting that we've had so many good rookies come in and give, just a good 15 to 20 to 25 minutes here and there. It's not what I expected this early in the year, especially with such little training camp and little time to get acclimated to these team systems.
Yeah, the thing about Pritchard too, he's playing meaningful minutes. He's not playing just
Mhm.
like in garbage time and showing up. Like he's playing late game minutes for Boston, and that's that's a tough lineup to get in and earn your
Time to
minutes
trade
in.
Kemba.
Yeah, right. Honestly,
Hey,
that might
it's
be
the perfect time. It's the perfect time. I'm
well,
just saying.
to loop back
Pritchard for Harden. Who says no?
talking about Kemba, I want to loop back to the point that you made about Steve Clifford, and he did. I mean, he did the same thing with those Charlotte teams. Like they were never top tier Eastern Conference teams, but they were in the playoffs and they're putting up fights. They were never like completely out of it. So I want to, and he like makes the most out of nothing pretty much. I want to give him a little bit of respect as a coach. But yeah, I'm glad you put together that list of rookies because they have certainly surprised, I think, most people, and even Wiseman. I mean, you talk about like, I know Golden State had a bit of a rough start, but they've turned it around since they won a couple games, and I think he's been a big part of that. He's been playing pretty well for the most part, at least in the minutes that I've seen him play. So I'm pretty impressed by him. But allow me now to talk about my Cavs a little bit because they are 3-1, and I know they haven't come against some great teams. Charlotte being one of them. They beat the Sixers, which I thought was a solid. Jordan pulled himself out. He's gonna. I mean, like at the end of the day, this thing is. I'm not expecting it to last the entire season, obviously. And they lost yesterday to the Knicks, which was a bad loss. Granted, they were getting the looks. They just couldn't make a shot. They shot like 35% from the field. They were leading the league in assists before last night at almost 32 assists a game. They had 22, I think, yesterday, and that's because of the shots weren't falling. But what I'm looking at more from the Cavs, aside from those 3 wins from these first 3 games, because they have been surprising, even to me, who was excited about them, whether they're going to be good or bad, is how they respond to this Knicks loss. If they can turn it around and get a win, I think that shows some maturity that maybe Sexton and Garland haven't shown yet. But they've been great. I mean, they've been great. The two of them have been great, and your boy JaVale is putting up meaningful minutes there in Cleveland. Drummond's been good. Loves out, but Okoro, before he had the ankle sprain, was playing really, really well, especially on that defensive end. And this team, they're fun to watch. Like at the end of the day, I don't care if they're losing games. It's been 3 years since the Cavs are fun to watch, and that's kind of what I'm like. That's what I'm excited about more than anything. I'm not ready to overreact after 4 games. I want to see where this goes.
I don't think you're overreacting. Honestly, I think this is the most. I'm pretty excited. Okay, not excited to watch Cavs.
Say excited. Say you can say excited. I give you permission.
But I would tune into a game now, like more than the last 2 seasons without LeBron, because the last 2 seasons, Sexton still didn't come on his own. Darius Garland was on and off. Kevin Porter Jr. He had off-court problems and everything. But I want to see. Like it's like one of those underdog teams that I would like to root for because I know they have such young talent. That are finally coming on their own. And I'm looking at your guys' schedule for the next 3 games. Next game, you guys are facing the Pacers. Game after that, the Hawks. Game after that, the Magic. So you guys are facing the top teams in the East right now. Can I see you guys pulling out all 3? Honestly, maybe. By the way Drummond is playing, and by the way, Colin Sexton.
Well, Drummond's playing really
well.
well.
Andre Drummond is playing like the way he did back when he was with the Pistons. And
I think that's correct.
I think so, yes.
And I think that's what the Cavs.
There's your answer.
Yeah, like that's what the Cavs wanted to get from Andre Drummond ever since they acquired him. So, and if all of them can, like honestly, the Cavs, they're super young. They still like need all that experience, especially playoff experience, to even get there. But they do have Andre Drummond, who is a veteran. He is a former All-Star who can still be an All-Star this season. They have Kevin Love. They have it's one of those teams. It just goes to show how deep the league is right now, like in all aspects. Like there's just so much talent out there right now that it really can go one way or the other. Even the Pacers, I know they're a stagnant team in terms of like we see the same roster year in and year out, but Oladipo's healthy. Sabonis
I love Sabonis.
is playing so good, and I can see him being an All-Star again this season. And you know what? I think they deserved a better playoff run last season because Oladipo barely came back from his injury, and it's just always getting back to the injury in the groove. But he's playing well. Miles Turner, they have all those guys. Malcolm Brogdon, excellent piece that I wish the Celtics can have on their bench or whatever, or as a starting point guard. But so it's just like, and then the Hawks are playing the way I think we all expected, especially with their new acquisitions. Trae Young is averaging the most points right now in the league, and I think he's going to be the league leader in points when it's when the season's done. But Trae Young is playing phenomenal basketball, super efficient too for a shooter that shoots 4-point shots. He's shooting very, very efficient. So But like I said, I can see the Cavs pulling those games out, and I think the next 3 games are going to be a true testimony as to, is this little run a fluke, or are they actually here to compete? So
yeah, well, like the thing is, Sexton, we knew he had the talent, but he in his rookie season, there were guys that they were saying that he didn't look like he knew how to play basketball. He kind of now he does look like he knows how to play basketball, and I think the biggest sort of improvement there has actually been Darius Garland, because last year in preseason he looked incredible, could not miss a shot. Season started and he just looked like he had no confidence. This season he's coming out there and he's looking like he did. Yeah, he's got all the confidence in the world right now. I hope it sticks around because he is an incredible talent. He was the number 5 pick and he played really well in college in the limited time that he saw there. But I think this team has the pieces. Whether or not they come together, it's yet to be seen. But in a weaker Eastern Conference, especially with teams like the Wizards sort of sitting at the bottom of the conference right now that I expected to be in the playoff hunt, maybe the potential's still there.
Can I make a bold prediction?
Yeah, go for it.
Cavs lose the next 3 games.
I wouldn't be surprised. That's the thing.
I mean, I can see that happening too.
But if the thing is, if they're bad losses, that's one thing. I don't expect them to be bad losses.
It depends on the quality.
Exactly. And again, in a weaker Eastern Conference, you can get into the playoffs under 500 record. So that, especially with the play-in opportunity.
It's almost recommended.
Yeah, it really is. Honestly, it really is. But I also want to hone in on the Nets, because I think the Nets, after those first 2 games, the conversation that a lot of us were having was they look like the real deal. And then they went and they lost Dinwiddie. And that was kind of the big, I guess the biggest news point of week 1 was the Dinwiddie injury and him being out for the entire season. And I think that's actually a pretty brutal blow to this Nets team. So Jeff, I'm going to toss it to you first. I know you brought them up earlier as well. What are your thoughts on the way the Nets played in those first couple games where they did look really good, especially behind KD and Kyrie? And how does this Dinwiddie injury affect their season going forward?
The Nets, people weren't exactly sure what to make of the Nets going into this season. There's a lot of speculation. Is Steve Nash the right man to lead the Nets? I certainly understand the skepticism there. Is Kevin Durant, is his head in the right spot, or is his ego getting in the way? Is Kyrie Irving going to have any idea what the heck he's doing this year? And so far, those questions just completely went away those first 2 games. In the opener, a complete annihilation of the Golden State Warriors, there was a lot of speculation whether Kevin Durant was really needed on the Warriors. One you might have said, oh, well, the Warriors won 73 games without Durant. They won the championship without Durant. They don't need him. He's just piggybacking off of them. And now consider how after Durant's injury in the 2018 playoffs, the Warriors immediately, 2019 playoffs, the Warriors immediately encountered considerable adversity and lost immediately to Toronto. And now Kevin Durant is building those game attributes and playing tremendously. He is a significant player and not just a piggybacker. He worked with successful people in Golden State, and now it's time for him to own his own city, figuratively speaking, of course. And then in the second, he's not quite rich enough to own all of Brooklyn yet. Not quite there. So, and in the second game against Boston, again, a complete avalanche against one of the teams that was supposed to be one of the best teams in the East. Now, their last 2 games, both against Charlotte, both were losses, were more unfortunate. Kevin Durant sits out entirely one of them. And Spencer Dinwiddie injury, you are right, Raj. That is a considerable detriment. However, the Nets have plenty of time to figure out a new rotation, potentially make another big move before the trade deadline. And most importantly of all, as we saw last postseason when the number 5 Heat easily defeated the number 1 Bucks, Kevin Durant is smart enough to know that they're just playing for the playoffs, right? Especially because there's probably not going to be very many fans this April and May. And without fans, there goes your home court advantage. The Nets have plenty of time to recover from Spencer Dinwiddie injury. We don't want to be too dismissive. It doesn't matter. They have an opportunity to recover from it if the front office and the coaching staff manage it well. Is Steve Nash the man for that job? We'll have to find out. But I, for one, am extremely intrigued with what the Nets have been doing so far.
Yeah, I have to agree with what you're saying in terms of the timeline that the Nets have to maybe recover from this. And I think the Dinwiddie blow, like I said, is huge, but it does open. The Harden trade is still kind of knocking on the door. I know it's stagnated. Actually, I kind of want to touch on how I saw a headline. I think it was today or yesterday that your Bucks. I have to give your Bucks some respect. They said that Harden is not a cultural fit with our organization, and I thought that was one of the best comments that I've seen.
I don't know if he's a cultural fit anywhere except for a strip club.
Yeah, honestly. But I agree with what you're saying in terms of the Nets have plenty of time to figure it out, and I'm not worried about the Nets, but I am kind of bummed to see Dinwiddie go out because he is a pretty crucial part of that team, and I know some of us had him in the running for Sixth Man of the Year before the season started and whatnot. We all kind of came into this season anticipating him to play well, and he was playing really well. He's an important part of that team. But do any of you guys think that he actually could be dealt here this season? Because I don't know if that's the smartest move for this Nets team.
Yeah, because I think it was reported already that at the end of the season there wasn't going to be no talks to extend his contract. So I think, and I don't know if you guys saw his Instagram post. And then it was like, oh, he a lot of inspirational stuff, blah blah blah, adversity, because he's torn his ACL before back in college. So, but now that do you guys know the timetable of the recovery or when he's back from a partial ACL tear?
He's out for the entire season.
Yeah.
For the entire season. Okay, so and if you guys have the chance to look at his Instagram post at the end, he was just talking about like, I don't know if I'm going to be part of this Nets championship run in 2021 or like what goes on from here, because there already been talks between the organization and his agent that they're not looking to extend his contract, and I can see Dinwiddie taking his talents elsewhere, where he doesn't become the fourth or fifth option, because he was averaging 20 points a game last season. And he was coming on his own too. So he's one of the guys you root for. Honestly, I don't really think you can hate him. Like he is an all-star caliber player that deserves to be an all-star, at least last season. But for these type of injuries to happen to players like him, it's sad to see what could have been this year. But thankfully, I don't know if it's messed up to say, but thankfully at least it's just a partial ACL tear instead of a full, where we've seen players like Derrick Rose and all them are full like torn of the MCL or ACL, which could be a lot worse. So he's dealt with a full one before, so thankfully he has the adversity that he's dealt with already with that before in the past. So now he has that like in a kind of a lower level. So for Dinwiddie, he's going to be all right in terms of his career, in terms of with the Nets. I don't know. I think he probably is done there.
Yeah, I agree. I think he'll probably be done there too, whether or not they trade him or just, let him walk. I think, they're already, think about all the contracts they already have for next year too. So money wise, it's going to be tough to acclimate him in, but he deserves to be, I wouldn't say a first option, but maybe a second or third option on a pretty good team. So he'll get that, but just the Nets overall, they look obviously really good so far. Katie and Kyrie look healthy and fluid, which is really the most important part. You need those two guys if you want to compete for a championship. And Kyrie's done a really good job of kind of getting everybody involved in the offense while still scoring efficiently. And Katie, thankfully, he looks great. That was like the big thing was, hey, is he going to be 85% as good, 90, 95? At this point, the number's close to 100%, in terms of like what he looks like now comparatively to what he looked like back in 2019. He's just getting shots off whenever he wants. He's still one of the most unguardable players this league has ever seen. And even with the Dinwiddie injury, they still have so many other pieces. They have, you have Joe Harris, you have Karis LeVert, who's now going to be getting a bigger role. I don't know if they're going to start him or not, but they have him to fill in that role there. So give credit to Nash and D'Antoni and Amari Stoudemire because they are doing a good job so far. We'll see if they're able to keep it up. Obviously, they're going to be, as we've seen, they've rested Katie and Kyrie a little bit as well. And I think that's going to be a common theme throughout the year because it's a marathon, not a sprint. So I think you're going to see the Nets. I don't think they're going to get the 1 seed. I think that's still going to be Jeff's Bucks, just from the sheer nature of Giannis and the fact that he's not going to rest a lot. But I think the Nets come playoff time, as long as they don't have any other injuries, are going to be a team it's going to be. Nobody wants to play them in a 7-game series.
Yeah. I kind of want to just open the floor now to anything else that we haven't discussed from week one. And anybody go for it. What do you guys else have? Yeah, Jeff, what you got?
Most impressive play of the year, Steph Curry's brother-in-law, the husband of his sister, Damian Lee, of all players, just like Thanasis Antetokounmpo, he's on the roster just to make the big guy happy. Well, the Bulls in a tie game, not only do they shoot it 2, they shoot it 2 with time left on the clock. Not a good idea against the Warriors, Damian Lee hits the three, and just like in UConn Cincinnati a couple years ago, goes happily up the court celebrating with time still on the clock. Thankfully for the Warriors, the Bulls' 60-foot shot banked harmlessly off the backboard, and the Warriors have a small reason to smile in a season without too many of them.
He got a shout out from Steph on Instagram too. He got the full shebang there, but that's a good shout out. I like that.
Yeah, I know exactly what Cincinnati UConn game you're talking about too, because that went to like 2 or 3 overtimes, and that was like the Big East tournament or the AAC tournament. But I think the Warriors. I mean, it's good to see Steph back too. That was my other thing. Like, it's good to see Steph and KD back just as a whole playing. The league is just more fun when those guys are playing each night because you're always getting alerts like, oh, KD's got 30 after 3 quarters, or Curry just hit a 35-footer, and you speak to the Damian Lee thing. I mean, how good of a teammate is Steph Curry? Like, he was the most excited out of anybody, probably including Lee, which I think says something about Steph Curry. He for some reason is disrespected among some fan groups and honestly a little bit of his peers. I think he doesn't quite get the credit that he deserves.
Happens to all the greats. If you're great, that's what happens. People hate you.
Yeah, and I think because he had that little bit of a meltdown in the 2016 finals, and they were 73-9, and then they got KD, and they kind of became the villains for a little bit. I think that's kind of rubbed some people the wrong way. But Steph Curry, by all accounts, is obviously, the greatest shooter we've ever seen, one of the top, somewhere in the top 30 players we've ever had in this league, and is one of the best teammates we've had in last year. I mean, the guy is never moody towards anybody. He's never, you don't see him on the court arguing with people. He welcomes KD in, and that could have gone so many different directions when KD came. But the reason that it worked and that they won back-to-back titles was he was so welcoming. He said, "Hey, sure, you want to take the big shots late in games in the finals? Go ahead. Like, I'm just going to be here to help out and do the best I can." He never showed any kind of negative feelings towards Kevin Durant or any remorse at all. So, give Steph Curry. I feel like that's something that's super underrated. Not that it matters necessarily a ton in the long run of things for his career, but I think it's an underrated thing. There aren't a lot of amazing teammates, and I think he is one of them. But some of the other notes I had, Phoenix, like we talked about, looks really good. They can go 9 deep, which I think is something that not a lot of teams can do in this league. You have Booker leading them in scoring so far, and he's only scored 19 a game, which means that the scoring loads are being taken off him, right? You have Ayton, you have Crowder, Saric, Chris Paul. You have a lot of different guys there, so they look really good as expected to start. Same thing with the Hawks. They have 8 guys over 10 points a game. And that includes Clint Capella, was only scoring 7, and you would think Capella would be like a 10 to 15 point a game guy, but he's like so far low on the totem pole because they have Trae Young, Herter, Gallinari, Bogdanovich, so they're clicking really well early. What else did I have?
Two teams that made a lot of moves in the off season, like smart moves that we talked about a lot in the off season.
Yeah, absolutely. Even Henry's buddy Jaylen Brown, took note of him. I mean, he's scoring 25 a game through 4 games, again, small sample size, but he seems like every year he gets a little bit better. And I think if we made it 35 minutes without talking about Harden, but if they talk about Harden to the Celtics for Smart and Jaylen Brown, if I'm Boston, I mean, I would say no for personal reasons, but I would also say no for business reasons, because I think Jaylen Brown is only getting better and fits so well alongside Tatum. And to bring somebody like Harden in, like, in all respect, that would not work for Tatum's game or Harden's game. What else do they have? We've kind of touched about Sabonis, 22, 11, and 7 through the first couple of games. He wasn't
player of the week.
And deservedly so. Christian Wood also looking like a steal for Houston in their first 2 games. Seems like his contract is going to look really good in a couple of years. And I think that was everything. I mean, you do the way too early MVP rankings, it would probably be something like, we didn't really talk about Embiid's been off to a really strong start for Philly. I've been impressed with him. He seems like he's kind of blocking out all the noise and is just dominating guys inside. I mean, he catches the ball within 5 feet. It's as close to an automatic 2 points as I've seen in a long time from a big man. And then Trae Young and Luka would also be in that conversation as well. So again, way too early, obviously, after 4 games, but those are some of the guys that have stood out so far.
Not Sexland, not in the MVP conversation yet?
No.
Come on, Jordan. Come on,
and
give me something.
And the Lakers will be fine. The only thing I've noticed from them, since I guess we should talk about the defending champs, is that a lot of new pieces. So they're gonna. I think they're like some games it's clicked and they've been like, hey, everyone's bouncing the scoring load and we're good. In other games, it seems like they're not quite sure who needs to be scoring on each possession or who like the focal point is. Kuzma looks good in spurts, and then like other games that he seems like he has to shoot the ball every time he touches it, and it drives me a little nuts.
But
and,
he plays better when he starts.
Well, that's great, but like that's not going to happen when everyone's healthy. Right? You just don't get that big piece of chicken when you have LeBron and AD on the court.
But don't you think KCP and Kuzma can be interchangeable in terms of who starts and who comes off the bench in like what games?
I mean, it could be. It depends on the matchup. That would mean they were like going extra big because Kuzma's what, like 6'8", so it'd be like 6'8", Schroeder's like 6'3", and then the two bigs. The one thing that I will say, and we noticed it last year in the playoffs, and it's very evident, and I've watched most of the Lakers games so far this year, Montrezl Harrell is one of the worst defensive big men in the league. He's atrocious. Like
he got bodied.
For everything he does on offense, and he makes the hustle plays. He gives you a lot of energy, all that rah stuff. Mm-hmm. But that man cannot guard a pick and roll to save his life. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying he's the sole reason they lost to Portland the other night, but he is the biggest. He was one of the biggest reasons,
honestly.
Yeah.
And if you go back and watch the last 3 minutes of that game, Dame or CJ just called up whoever he was guarding and just said, "We're going to run it," and he just doesn't. He doesn't move his feet. He commits dumb fouls. He's not in position. It blows my mind for a guy looks like he's such a hard worker and provides so much energy on one end that it just doesn't translate to the other. But if there's going to be, like I said, I tweeted the other day, if he wants to play any meaningful minutes in the last like 5 minutes of a playoff game, that needs to get fixed right away. Otherwise, they'll have to close out the game with Kuzma or Marc Gasol or somebody else because it's unacceptable. But that's all I have on the Lakers so far. They'll be fine. They play San Antonio tonight. They should win by 10.
Henry, anything else that you wanted to point out?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest surprises besides Jordan's gnome, I think for me,
that's a staple of this show.
Would honestly be, and I hate to say this, Gordon Hayward has been playing really good. He's been playing good.
He's been playing well, but those Charlotte Hornets still don't look. I know they beat the Nets, but I mean, let's. I mean, Ball's not been very good. He's not.
No.
He's been pretty bad. If we're being
early on, and you know what? I think it's a Ball brother thing. It's gonna take time.
You leave Lonzo go.
He wants him so bad. Yeah, but he against the Cavs, in the first game he had 28 points. Against the Nets, he had 28 points. I know they're 1-2 right now, but for God's sake, they beat the Nets. They beat a full-fledged Nets team. And that, I don't know if you guys saw that game, but Kevin Durant just kept getting dunked on that whole game. It was actually pretty funny to see. But players that are playing well also that I like to see playing well, Terry Rozier. That's the reason why he left Boston, because he felt like he was critical to what he deserved to have and the opportunities he thought he deserved to have in Boston that they weren't giving him. That's why he went to Charlotte. So Terry Rozier Gordon Hayward dynamic is back, but like in that Hornets form now. And you know what? I feel like it can work pretty well. I'm not saying like top 5 in the East or anything, but they're showing flashes of potential. Terry Rozier had 42 points in the season opener, still lost to the Cavs, so credit to Rogers Cavs. But also Gordon Hayward has been playing, and I'm like I said, I'm jealous the way he's playing, because if he performed like that in the playoffs last season, this would be a much different conversation, but he didn't, and that was for different circumstances. But he's fully healthy now. There's no excuse for him not to play like the Gordon Hayward we all know he can play as. So the Hornets got the best of him, especially because they're paying him so damn much. So they better. And then aside from that, just too many other surprises to like call on right now.
What about the Knicks having 2 wins? The Knicks are 2-2. They're fine. They have the same record as the Lakers right now. What do we think about that?
I mean, Julius Randle is the weirdest player to me.
That was ridiculous.
He had like 28 something or something. I don't know.
He had a triple double.
Yeah, he had a triple double, and it's weird because it's like he is the most consistent and consistent player probably in the league, and it's fun. Like the reason why I say that is because in the Lakers, I thought he was atrocious in terms of efficiency, but like now on the Knicks, like he reminds me of a Pascal Siakam, where his moves are very predictable, hence why he's not efficient, because the defense can figure him out so easily. But when he has these type of games, I'm like, he has those flashes of like why he was drafted, as a lottery pick, coming out of Kentucky and stuff like that. That's why this is the type of potential that I thought he was going to show on the Lakers, but then I remember in the season opener in his rookie debut, didn't he like break his leg or shit? Yeah. So I think that was the peak Lakers bad luck right there. But that's like a different story. But it just goes to show again, the league has so much talent spread out because I do like if you look at the Knicks roster, they don't have a bad roster per se.
Well, I think the biggest thing with the Knicks is they hired Tibbs, and I know Tibbs gets a lot of shit from people because of his situation in Chicago and whatnot. I think he's still a good coach.
He's a good coach.
I think he's a good coach, and I'm not saying that he's going to lead these Knicks to the playoffs, but I think he might provide a little bit of change in culture. Maybe not the culture that they're looking for, but it's still going to be a change in culture for a Knicks team that's been more or less like tuned out for the past few years. And Tibbs teams, they might not be the most respected teams around the league, but they give 100%. I think you have to respect them for that.
He led an up and coming Bulls team even before Derrick Rose's MVP season. Like he's the reason why. Well, not the main reason because that Derrick Rose, but he led that team, to a 7-game series back with Boston back was it 2009, 2010. So he has that potential as like being a very, very good coach, especially for super young players because he was coaching a very super young Derrick Rose. So now he's got RJ Barrett, who in the season opener he played phenomenal. And then he has I still think Obi Toppin might be one of the steals of the draft. I think he has a lot of potential.
Missing some time here, right? With the 2 weeks or something like that, he's out.
Yeah, 2 weeks, and then and there's actually a lot of players if you guys want to touch upon that right now about some players that are going to miss some significant time due to injury.
Well, yeah, Ja is going to miss 3 to 5 weeks, I believe. Kevin Love's out 3 to 4 weeks. So those are a couple of the big names that are injured. We already talked about Dinwiddie. I think the Ja one is big because that Memphis was going to be on one of those teams that was on the cusp of making the playoffs in the West, and I think 3 to 5 weeks of being out could be enough to knock you out of the playoff run in the Western Conference, especially if it's your best player. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is still great, and he can lead that team, but Ja is so important to that Memphis team.
He came out like a monster, too.
44 points
he got 44, yeah. He looked really good early, so that's a shame.
Yeah. And Kevin Love, I don't need to touch on that, really, because he wasn't doing all that much. Former Cavs great, yes, correct. He had 11 points in the one game that he played this entire season. But yeah, I think the Ja injury is brutal. Anybody else closing thoughts here? Anybody?
Yeah, I have one last thought.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm concerned, even with fewer regular season games, the legacy of load management going forward. We've talked about this a lot in the past in the Simple Association podcast because it's not as big of a deal this year because there aren't any fans in us anyway. But what about in the future? When I want to go to the arena and say Lakers coming down, I want to see LeBron and AD. If they're hurt, I'm ripped off, right? Those tickets are hundreds of dollars. So we've already seen it a couple times this year. LeBron's been limited to 20 minutes a game several times. Not the only reason they Lakers have lost a couple of games. Kawhi Leonard was hit in the mouth. He missed a game legitimately. However, it helps contribute to a 50-point loss to the Mavericks. Imagine if you were at that game. Oh my goodness!
I wish I was at that game.
My favorite team would be lost by 50, right? Or Giannis missed a preseason game because of back stories. In other words, I decided my contract. I get a day off. So it is. I'm making light of the situation. It is somewhat of a concern in the years going if teams like put out for the playoff. You don't care about the regular season. It's a sticky situation, and unfortunately, the league hasn't really done anything to address it so far.
Yeah, I think we'll see a little bit more of it this year just because of the shortened timeline. That's definitely something we've talked about. But I agree with you, Jeff, that if players get used to it, could it bleed into following seasons? That's certainly a risk here. Jordan,
the problem is that unfortunately it works. It's proven that you pace out somebody like LeBron throughout the whole regular season and AD as well, and then they're fully ready for the grind of the playoffs, and you see the results that it could lead to. So I agree with you. I want to see the guys play. I'm grew up watching an era where you had guys. LeBron obviously in his much younger years was playing every single game. Kobe was playing every single game. Going back to the 90s, same thing with MJ. And these guys were dedicated to playing every single game. And then, somewhere along the early 2010s is when we started kind of seeing, the Spurs kind of started it with Duncan and Manu and Parker and those guys. And it's kind of just trickled down. So unfortunately, I don't, unless they start finding them super heavy amounts of money, I don't see it changing. But it does stink because when we do have fans back in arenas, you do you're paying good money to go see your favorite team and your favorite players, and you want to be able to see them play.
Henry, any thoughts on that before we get out of here?
It's gonna happen. I feel like at this point it's inevitable to like moving forward. We're just gonna be in an era of ever changing rules and dynamics now, at least for the next 5 years. So I can see now when I see on Bleacher Report or something, so and so is out due to, and in parentheses I see rest. I'm like, damn, that's actually a thing now, you
It's
know.
a designation now, yeah.
Yeah, and then like what Jordan brought up, I remember growing up, watching an era where like Kobe and LeBron played all 82 games, or like all these Dirk played 82 games, you know, like even guys like that. So we're not going to see that as much because there's going to be so many loopholes now in terms of like what teams can and can't do, and like them just dealing with like whatever $50,000 fine is just it's changed to them. And I do think there is a dynamic within franchises where certain players are getting better treatment. I think Paul George got called out on that by Charles Barkley. I don't know if you guys saw that interview. And it was super awkward, but it was super funny too. And I think that can lead to damaging a franchise too. I think that's what led to Montrezl Harrell ultimately leaving, because he knew certain players were getting better treatment to like what everybody else was getting due to just their stature as a player. So I think it can lead to positive and negative effects moving forward. But like I said, like we all know, the NBA is an ever-changing league. That's what makes it so fun and exciting, because we just don't know what's next. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what Adam Silver's has up his sleeve, honestly.
Yeah, one weekend. It's a lot. You got something, Jordan?
No, you're good. I just want to end with one thing because I know we got to get out of here.
The Lakers back to back.
No. This is something to be good. So obviously we have some teams on the slow starts. You look at Washington and Denver and a couple other teams, and it'll be interesting to see what coaches could potentially be on the hot seat early in the year. Could it be a Scott Brooks? I don't think Mike Malone's pretty safe because I think Denver's going to get together. But there could be some other teams where coaches are a little bit on the hot seat. And if any vacancies open up, I just want to say I put my nomination in for this guy.
You kept it. I hate you.
In the top right corner. That is our boy Raj. He coached number 14 there, Horace Grant Jr. to a 20 and 10 average.
I shouldn't have sent that to you.
I could not believe you sent it to me today. So like I said, if you need a coach, top right corner. Good old Raj with LeBron's.
That team.
Is that a gray on gray outfit as well?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know what's going on.
A grout fit.
Yeah. I don't know. 2011, I think.
Year of the grout fit.
That was a weird time for everybody, bro.
Junior year of high school, I was stressed out. I was like, I got the college applications. I got all this shit going on right now.
I don't blame you, bro. That was a weird time for everybody.
And that team was not very good, if we're being completely honest. That year I was an assistant. The next year I was an assistant. Year after that, I took over head coaching duties, took my team to the finals. We lost in the finals, but that's what you get with head coach Raj right here. So that'll bring us to a close for this episode. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to Jeff for joining us as well. Do you want to let people know where else you're writing and stuff, Jeff, before we get out of here?
Yeah, don't worry about following me on social media. I'm not on there much anymore, but I'm a main editor for Nuts and Bolts Sports. Please, if you're on YouTube, hit that follow button down there at the bottom. We got great content coming at you almost every day. Follow us on Twitter at Nuts and Bolts SP. We got a great tweet team tweeting items out. And as for my writing, hopefully the WNBA is going to be back to normal next year, and I'll have some on-site coverage for you.
All right. Thanks again, Jeff, for joining us. I'll close it out with saying happy birthday to the GOAT, LeBron James. Cavs are still the best team on this podcast right now. It probably won't last more than 2 more days.